the stakeholder engagement, as it says, is again, it's still planning. It's fairly early stage. We're not really actually doing any stuff here, any tasks, physically in this particular sort of activities. This is pretty much like planning. It's still, we're talking about it, but now we are moving ahead in terms of not just the approach. Now that we have got pretty much fixed in terms of approach, the communication plan, the types of governance, the kind of methodologies, the techniques that you would use, you pretty much kind of had a idea about that so far. Now we are getting to the next important thing, which is to identify the stakeholders. Who are the people who you would need to engage throughout the project in terms of getting your needs, getting their needs, getting their, and understanding their objectives, their expectations, and then how you could shape those in terms of your product vision and the roadmap. So again, in terms of the inputs, you've got the business needs and the business analysis approach, because by this time, by this step, before this step, that's what we did, right, in the previous one. So we've had the business analysis approach as the output there, which would become an input in this activity. So these are the two inputs that you would start off this particular activity with, and then you would try and plan the stakeholder engagement. Again, bear in mind, we're still in planning. It's still about coming up with some kind of preparatory framework. It's not the actual doing of the engagement activities and things like that. And the output at the end of this activity is basically stakeholder engagement approach. Bear in mind, I'm not calling it as phase. I'm not calling it as stage. I'm just calling it as activity, because again, just try to bring in the difference in the waterfall type of approach. You've got the phases, you've got the stages, you go from one phase to another phase, one phase to another phase. But in the kind of work that we're doing now, it's blended, it's agile. You could actually kind of have a waterfall as well as agile. So that's why you do activities. It's not phases. That activity of this stakeholder engagement planning could be done even towards the end. So it's not as if it has to be like one stage is done, then you need to get to the next stage and next stage, like a waterfall. So I'm just calling these as activities, and these can be done anytime. So just that's something which you need to keep in mind. So in terms of the guidelines and tools, what do you need to start off your planning for the stakeholder engagement? You need to understand the business analysis performance assessment. That's a very important element here. And then you also need to look at the change strategy. How do you envisage the organization to adopt this change? What kind of strategies are there ahead for the organization to consider as options? And what is the potential outcome? So that's the current state description in terms of where you are. So the as is, that's what we call in the business parlance as is the current situation. And then to be is the proposed situation, where you want your organization to be in terms of your either strategies, in terms of the implementation of your plans, your product development, your process improvement, anything. It could be anything. So that is the to be state. So there are two states: current state, which is the as is state, and then the potential, the future state is basically the to be, the proposed state is to be solution state. So there's a gap always, right, between the as is and to be, and that's what you would need to identify as a business analyst. And then you would need to come out with options and propose an approach to bridge this gap from the as is to the to be. And that's what is the
role you have to use this word. You have to use these words exactly like it is, as is, to be, and all in either in a real case scenarios and all.
Yeah, in practical sense, you would use that more than current and all that. You typically use as is and to be. That's what you would actually come across in your JDs as well. If you see some of the job descriptions of BA would involve saying that identify the as is and the to be stage and define the steps and all that. That's how they would typically write. So that's a BA parlance again, as is and to be. Yeah.
How many
of these, as we discuss, only those keywords. So that's something which would help you handy when you actually do the interviews or even after in the job. So this is more current state, and this is more of like change strategies. You don't use these terms in a practical sense. So you typically use something like a roadmap, for example, is a more used word rather than this. Backlog is a more used word. As is and to be is a more used word. Prospect or proposed stage, a proposal is a more used practical words like that. Performance assessment, all these more of Right, the difference between what is a theory, what is the more accepted theoretical stuff, whereas things which are practically done, you don't use some of these words like these. So you use more of the typical words that we talk, lingo. So as is and to be is most used like that.
Okay.
What would be the tasks that use output? So you've got planned business analysis, governance. So obviously that's the one that that has come through from the last time. We've got the planned business analysis, information management, and then we've got to prepare for elicitation, conduct elicitation, then communicate business analysis information, stakeholder collaborations. How would you manage that? Change strategy and assessment of the risks. We were talking about all of these, in the course of the last few slides. So we would potentially use all of them, and this would follow through as well. So that's what we're going to discuss as well. So in terms of stakeholder engagement, so the process used by an organization to engage relevant stakeholders. So basically the reason, this is the definition of why we would need to have an engagement with the stakeholders to make sure that we engage the relevant stakeholders, whether it is business stakeholders, technology stakeholders, operational aspects, or customers. So when we talk about stakeholders, they could mean a huge range of different, not only people, but also teams, groups, departments, or even to some extent, organizations who are either inside or outside of the organization, or our company, our firm, or basically even our team as well. So these are all called stakeholders. In the parlance of user experience, for example, even the users are stakeholders, we'll just call them as users, product users or consumers, right? And then you've got customers, people who buy your product. So we've got a separate category of the stakeholders already identified. So the rest of the the so-called stakeholders, we would then say that these are the key stakeholders. And they could be, again, classified as internal stakeholders. Some could be external. So that your suppliers, your vendors, regulators, and your competitors, they're all external stakeholders. Whereas your employees, your team members, or other team members, other departments like quality department, quality assurance, who would come in and check and give you a kind of a certificate. All of these are internal stakeholders, right? So that's how you would need to. And when you say stakeholders, again, not everyone would be important for you. So we will actually talk about some techniques that we would identify, that we would help to kind of indicate who is a relevant stakeholder for us. Why should we engage them in the first place? So we'll discuss that in the next couple of slides.
I think I'm pretty much aware of how to identify a stakeholder, because most of the times you're talking to a person who has got hardly any power to sign off the most important check, or whatever, or the key decision, and you're talking to somebody who would be of no use. And then you realize you spent 2 months dealing with this fellow, and the person above has a completely different idea or the things, and then you have to resume. So it is better the sooner you identify who that person is. That's right. You save a lot of time and energy. Absolutely. And the whole
Yeah, in fact, there is a good technique I would use. I would suggest it's called Power-Interest Grid. I was talking about it yesterday. We'll talk about it. So it's basically, it not only talks about the interest of the person in your initiative, whether it's a project, product, process, whatever it is, but also not just interest. They're not just showing interest, but they've got the power as well. They've got either the authority, or they've got the budgets, or they're the people who are sponsoring your project. So you need to match these two. Just because they're interested doesn't mean you keep engaging them. And if they don't have any say, or if they don't have the budgets, if they don't hold the strings to the purse, why would you try and impress them and keep them communicated, keep them informed every day? There's no point. So there's an interest, very, very useful tool that we would talk about in the next couple of slides, actually. So in terms of identifying, analyzing these stakeholders, so we've got decision-making authority and level of power or influence. So both are important. So one is obviously whether they've got the authority, and the other one is how much of power they have or influence they've got on our piece of work that we're doing, whether it's a small project, a product development, or it could be anything, or a process improvement. Thorough stakeholder analysis conducted to identify. So it's important that we do the proper analysis in the first place, so that, as you said rightly, stop wasting all the time, money, and effort in dealing with these stakeholders who are not useful at all. it would be really useful for us to start early and then engage the right set of stakeholders from the day one. And then analysis results help in planning for collaboration, communication. So obviously, it's not just identification, but once we have this identification done, then we can try and engage, come up with plans how to engage them, how to communicate with these key stakeholders, how to keep them informed, how to keep them more and more engaged in terms of what is happening. So then you can come up with the plans for those kind of things. So as BA, what do we need to do? So basically, this is what is called the conducting of the stakeholder analysis. And in this kind of activity, what is important is we need to identify the stakeholders based on their power to influence and also the interest, as we discussed. So high power, high interest, and low power, low interest. Some people are having both high power as well as high interest. So you're most likely to keep them engaged, most likely to actually kind of keep them updated about what's happening on the project, because they not only have the interest, but also they've got the power, they've got the authority. And some other people who've got low power, low interest, you don't need to bother about them, just ignore. Just don't bother about them, because you don't want to waste your time, money and effort and are trying to communicate with them. Just ignore them. And then there are some people who have got a mix of this, they've got high power and low interest and low power, high interest. So we will talk about how that could be managed, right? And then this is very important. Why do we need this? Because if we do not know the key stakeholders, then we would miss the critical needs. We're missing totally important picture in this whole thing, and then we would lead completely different channel. We'll take a different route, and that would take us to a completely different direction than what we expect. So it's better to actually identify the key stakeholders and start addressing those. So this is something which is what I've created for easy purpose. We have created this, I think, good 4 years ago, this infographic. So basically, if you look at this, this is also called as PIG, Power-Interest Grid. And here you're talking about the interest, the stakeholders' interest in your initiative, project, change program, product development, whatever it is. So essentially, process, anything that you're working on is on this axis, x-axis, and the y-axis you plot the power or authority within the organization, their power or authority. So this is the power and this is interest, right? And then here you start with low, medium, high, let's assume, and then there's no such thing as you need to plot like 0 to 100 and all that. That's nonsense. So just stick to the basics and just call it as low, medium, high. That means low power. Sorry.
Is this the official grade, or what is it?
This is a tool, but we created this as an infographic for you, so it's easy for you to relate to. I have a video also. I can share that with you. Yeah. This is basically a tool that it's an industry standard tool called Power-Interest Grid. Different people have got different ways of showing it, but we created this. We showed this way to. We created this, and we are using it to convey what we want. It's a very powerful way. So if it's a low power, basically here on this x-axis, there's low power, and it grows as you go from left to right. So it's medium power, and then you've got very high power, yeah, and power interest here, and then the power is on this axis. Sorry, so you've got low interest, and then here low interest, medium interest, high interest, and here you've got low power, medium power, high power, yeah. It's simple. So did you get this axis? Yeah, so you just plot the interest.
Yeah, I got it.
Here, and then power is on this axis, okay? And then you've got people on, for example, just draw some lines here, assuming that you've got 3 lines, one line here and another line here, perhaps another line here, and then you draw another 3 lines here, for example. So that becomes a kind of a matrix, 3 by 3 matrix, 9, okay? So you've got low power, low interest, okay? So keep it low key. You don't have to worry about it, actually. Just ignore them. Okay, people who don't have any power and who are not interested in what you're doing, why would you bother even updating or sending reports? You just ignore them. And people with medium interest and and still they've got low power, all you need to do is medium to high interest. If they're still interested in what you're doing, what's happening, what is the project, which project are you working on, how is the project going, it's more or less like a kind of a water cooler moment, right? So you just happen to meet near the water cooler and talk about, hey, what's up, how is it going? Yeah, it's good. people, they don't have any power, they can't do anything to help you. So why do you want to unnecessarily waste your time? So you just kind of inform them, yeah, it's good, that's going on well, okay, no problem. So far the team is getting in there with, so you just talk a little bit about that. You don't have to ignore them, but at the same time you don't really engage with them too much. But when you have some power, right, the medium, so basically the medium, and people, whether they have got interest, no interest, or medium interest or high interest, doesn't matter, they've got some power and let's say some interest into what's happening, you just keep them on your side basically. So basically try and say, yeah, I just thought I would let you know, so send a report every month, 1 month, 2 months. So basically these are the people who are in the senior management or middle management, not from your team, not from your department, but from a different department, right? But they would have actually got something. For example, somebody like, if it's a technology project, somebody from a different business organization, business unit. If it's a marketing project, CRM that we're talking about, customer relationship management product that you're trying to to deploy and develop and deploy into your organization, obviously the customer and the marketing team would be very, very interested. The sales team would be very interested. IT team is the main stakeholder. So for example, if it's the HR team, right? If this guy is HR head of HR, and he would just generally understand, okay, well, how is this project going? We got some requests for recruiting some people on this project. Have you got the people on board? Yeah, okay, fine. We just wanted to check if you're okay with that. So the team is in place, yeah. So basically this guy, the HR guy, because of the fact that he's interested in recruiting and training and other things, so he generally asks, he has got some interest into your project, but he's not really so keyed in that he would like to understand the functionality, what you're trying to deliver and all that stuff. He doesn't have any clue, and he doesn't need to know as well, right? So in that case, for this HR guy, we just try and keep him on board, right? Just saying that, okay, yeah, send some monthly one report, or just talk to him, go to his cabin and then see, yeah, this is how it's going. You don't have to ignore them. You should not ignore them, because they have got some power as well, because they might come into your help later. And then you don't have to completely give them updates every day, because they're not interested that much. But whereas when it comes to your really people with high power, very high power, right, and then they don't have any interest. But the problem is, people of this kind of nature would actually typically be, for example, the operations team, for example. Yeah, these guys, the operations head, they don't have anything to do with your sales force automation or your CRM project that we are working on. But they, because of the fact that they have got high power and the influence is there, they would like to meddle into your efforts if they are wrongly, if they're irritated, or if they've got some, if you're taking some team members from their team and putting into your project team, they'll get highly irritated. They might actually turn into kind of what we call as they will try and sabotage your product, your project. Why do they sabotage your product? Because they've got that high power, high influence, and if they're not kept happy, or if they're not really if you leave them, if it is like normal run-of-the-mill situation every day, that's fine. They're not bothered. They don't want to know what is going on to your CRM product and product implementation. They don't care, because they don't have anything to do with this. But if push comes to shove, something happens to the setup, and if things start going the wrong direction, and if they're affected because of that, if you've taken some people from their team, then they will definitely try and sabotage your product or project. Why? Because they have got that high power, and things are not going the way that they should be. So if that is the case, these are the kind of people that you should keep a watch. You don't have to keep updating them. You don't have to send reports and everything else, but you should just try and keep a watch on them, what they're doing, how they're perceiving the things, so that anything adverse happens, you can really take a quick action immediately. Yeah. And then the people who have got high power but some interest, what you need to do is to, they're in this one, right, this middle. So they've got some interest, but they've got really high power, high influence. You need to keep them satisfied. So these are the people, like for example, the sales head. Okay, he has got really high power, and you're implementing the CRM. So obviously he has to be, he has got that final say. But then he's not interested every day advice, because more to do with marketing project that you're doing, the customers and engaging the customers, building the CRM system and all that. So he's not directly affected by this, right? So, but still, for the fact that he has got a later point of time, there might be some contact point, something that he might actually get out of the CRM system, which might give you some leads to his sales team to pursue. So he has got some interest that way. He's not totally interested, but he has got some interest coming out of this project at a later point of time. So for that kind of reason, you need to keep these guys satisfied, in the sense you don't have to update them every day or every week, but at least kind of send them a report maybe once in a fortnight. Send out a report saying, hey, this is what is happening. By the way, we're building the system. We've got the team on board. We've got the first sprint off, and then we have got this features. These set of features are to be ready and all that. Just have a quick email that you send out as a kind of a note to these people, just to keep them satisfied and let them know that this is happening, because they have got some interest. They've got very high power. They can sabotage again. They can try and bring the project down if they're not happy, or if they feel that they're not being put in the loop. And then the other important, perhaps the most important and most critical aspect of this whole equation is the people with high power and also high interest. And these are the people that you must engage regularly, very, very, very close contact, manage them very, very effectively, perhaps even on a daily basis. Send them out things what are happening, and then maybe a couple of days go to the cabin, tell them this is what is happening, keep them really informed, updated. These are the people who are project sponsors. If they're not happy, they can cut the budget. The whole project and initiative could come to a standstill. So you need to keep them really engaged on a continual basis. So this is what is called a PIG, power interest grid. Some people call it power influence, but it's not correct, because power or influence is one and interest is another thing. So power interest grid. So important thing is high power, high interest, engage them. Low power, low interest, ignore them. Some power, some interest, keep them on your side and try and just keep them updated. Yeah, that's the whole idea. Okay. So again, this is what another thing here. Power of influence of stakeholders. Again, interest of stakeholders. It's not influence of stakeholders. It's interest. What their interest in your initiative here. So again, this is just a kind of a representation. Finance. Typically, if it's an IT kind of a project, then you've got CRM product I was talking about, right? So you've got finance, legal, networking, security, web standards. They're here. And typically, if it's an IT project, you have got the CIO or the CTO, change manager, project manager. They're the people who would be very, very interested, very, very powerful, because it's their budget, right? They're spending their budgets to create this project and to give you the salaries and things like that. So these are the people you should be keeping on your side and engage them and things like that. Whereas people who are in the other quadrants, training managers and things like that, call centers, testers, customers, they could potentially come here because it's not really developed yet. So that's why you just don't worry about it. But once you have got that, then your training manager, legacy system owner, all of them, you try and understand and keep them informed what's happening. You already got a system. You just try and talk to them over the water cooler. What's happening? How are you doing before? What kind of process you had? So get that. You don't have to inform them, because anyway, it's a legacy system. It's like already done, right? You're not really trying to do anything on the top of what they have got. So